So when we focus on the risk hierarchy, you can see the same amount of risk, but now distributed across the various dimensions. So the very first dimension is the organization unit. As you can see, this is a pretty simplified bank structure with some digital banking operations and physical banking operations with a couple of regions and a couple of few branches within each region. There's investment banking and consumer banking operations also. From risk events perspective, that's a little bit more robust because there are risk events that really result in the loss of money for the organization. There are risk events that result in loss of client data or integrity problems for the client data. There are service disruption related risk events and other enterprise risks, but most of the risks really here, as we can see, a significant portion of the risks focus on the client data events. From impact perspective, that's not necessarily important from our perspective for this analysis, but what you see here is direct financial impact and non-financial impact categories. What is more important for the purposes of our analysis to identify what we should focus on is the threats view. So you can see that there are physical security threats and IT security threats and other areas also, or other threats as well. But really the main portion, almost all of the risk comes from IT security threats. And within that, actually, most of the risk comes from malware and phishing campaigns. So this already highlights that this is probably one of the main focus we should have. Then from an attack surface perspective, you can see the physical infrastructure of the organization, what could be targeted by various threats. The digital infrastructure, which as you can see, covers most of the risks for the organization. So again, we should probably start focusing on the digital infrastructure. And within the digital infrastructure, we can also see here, as well as similar to the candle chart analysis, that the service provider API is the most significant factor. So considering this type of analysis, let's really start focusing on these categories that we defined. So let's start focusing on the malware and then probably the service provider APIs. Once we go back, you can see that a lot of areas became zeros, so eliminate those. That's what's not important for the purposes of the analysis. Obviously, from an attack surface perspective, now we only have the service provider APIs. From threats perspective, only focus on malwares. From impact areas perspective, there is still a lot of impact. And then from risk events perspective, this hierarchy suggests that there are a lot of potential risk events that could be generated by malware coming through the service provider APIs. To some extent, this is cybersecurity. From another perspective, this could be considered as a third-party risk for the organization itself.